Thank you so much for joining us. With that, we will get started. Today we have Merceydes Morassi who will be joining us. She is an LMHC and a BCBA, and she will be presenting on classroom strategies, part one, transitions.
Thank you so much. And yes, sorry again for all the technical difficulties. PowerPoint apparently is not my jam, or maybe I will blame it on the Mondays, right? So, yeah, classroom strategies. We're going to start with transitions, and hopefully this will be something that maybe we can tackle a few other classroom difficulties, not just transitions, but for today and tomorrow, that's the main focal point, since transitions can be kind of difficult. Okay, so first of all, what are they? Transitions are when we are moving our attention or our physical bodies from one location or activity to another. And so this is, we do transitions or have so many different transitions all day long, but some easy ones teachers might think of is when we're moving kids from one classroom to another, like maybe they're going from their main classroom to PE or to lunch or coming in from recess, or within the classroom, like maybe we're, all right, put away your backpacks and everybody take out this book. That's a transition. The transitions are often associated with problem behavior. Why? That's a big question teachers always want to know, but why and what can we do about it? Luckily, we can do a few things, and we do have a pretty good understanding as to why. But before we get into that, as you can see in my notes, I'm supposed to ask you about any transitions that you might have difficulty with. Does anybody have any transitions that are particularly difficult? Okay, well, and then I don't even have my chat box open here, so I'm hoping there's nothing in there that I'm missing, because I can't seem to get that open either today. Today is not my day with the computers, but we will move forward. So one transition that I think we can all relate to, a transition in adult life, actually is very on par for what's going on today, is Mondays. Like every Monday, we transition back into work. We leave behind the weekend of rest and relaxation and fun. And we have all sorts of catchphrases for this process. I mean, for example, the Sunday scaries. The night before, everyone goes back to work, Sunday scaries. It's a common term that people use, but I think we have to ask ourselves, like, are Sundays inherently scary? No, they're really not. It's not like we look up the definition of Sunday and there's a picture of Nosferatu, the vampire, or anything. Like, Sundays really aren't inherently scary. But maybe you've heard someone say, oh man, I've got a case of the Mondays, which I think I actually already said today. That's funny too, because Mondays aren't inherently hard. There's nothing about the day Monday itself that makes it a difficult day. And so these kind of all have to do with this whole transition thing. The obvious answer to both of those questions is no. But it does a good job in highlighting the aversiveness of transitions, even highly predictable and routine transitions. Isn't it funny that we still call Sunday night, when we're thinking about what we have to do Monday, we still call it the Sunday scaries, even though, I'm talking to adults here, right? We've been doing this wake up, go to work every day. We've been doing it for God only knows how long. Like, there's nothing new about this transition. So I think it's a really easy case to point out that transitions can be aversive/annoying, right? Even when they're highly predictable, even when it's something we've been doing every week for the last, 10, 12, 20 years, who knows? So, and especially this is a really good case in point too. Transitions are difficult for us, but I'm speaking from my perspective. I don't have any developmental or psychological issue, and this transition time is still difficult. So what's it like for our kids that are maybe on the spectrum, or kids that have some other issue? Their transitions that they have to deal with in school might be particularly difficult. Okay. So a little bit of the behavioral mumbo jumbo here. Sundays are scary because we are aware that reinforcement is ending. or that something aversive is beginning. That's why they are scary. They're not inherently scary. It's we know it is the end, essentially. It's the end of our rest, relaxation period, and it is the beginning of actual work, maybe stress, maybe the boss is going to yell at us, whatever it may be. Even the thoughts about the transition can be aversive in themselves. And I think that one is really case in point too. So like, if you think about it, sometimes we work ourselves up Sunday night thinking about all the things we're going to have to do on Monday. It's not even Monday yet, and we're already dreading it and already feeling anxiety or some other, negative feeling because we're thinking about all the things we have to do. Now, that can happen with kids too. Maybe they are thinking about or anticipating the fact that, today is a Monday and every Monday they have to go to some art class or some class that they don't like. And then I gave an example here. Have you ever seen a kid start crying before the end of recess bell actually rings? And so I think most of us have probably seen a case like this. That's a Sunday scary equivalent. Like recess is still going, but they know it's about to end. And it's that fear or anticipation of it ending that actually produces that emotional reaction. Okay, so Mondays are hard because we are transitioning from weekends, which include rest and fun, things that are reinforcing for us. And we're going back to things that are either less reinforcing, things that might be considered more neutral. So for those of us who love our jobs or have good jobs, the job might not be aversive, but it's definitely not as reinforcing as, movie marathoning on your couch or going out with your friends, right? So we might call it neutral. And in some cases, it's actually aversive. Nobody, no matter, no diagnosis needed, nobody, period, looks forward to doing something or going somewhere they don't want to be. So point blank, transitions can be hard for anyone. Okay. So why do tantrums and other problem behavior occur during transition? So there's been several studies, especially in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, that particularly focus on transitions because during transitions, we do see a lot of problem behavior. I think the most common ones would probably be tantruming, crying, kicking, screaming, yelling. We probably also have seen some elopement, kids just trying to take off. SIB, self-injurious behavior. Maybe this could be head banging. We might see aggression, or maybe they throw things or throw things off of their desk. So there's a lot of different problem behaviors that can emerge during this time. So the reasons for this, there's three main reasons. Number one, the kids want to continue engaging in what they call the pre-transition activity. So whatever they were doing before this transition, they want to stay doing it, so like maybe in a classroom, we are doing arts and crafts or something like that. And then after arts and crafts, we're going to move into math. And so they don't want to move into math. They don't like math. Math isn't fun. So the problem behavior starts because they want to keep doing the arts and crafts. A second reason, they want to avoid or delay the activity they are transitioning to or the actual location of the activity. So in the example I just used, they wanted to continue doing arts and crafts because they love arts and crafts, but maybe they're doing a neutral activity, something they don't love or hate, and I'm not sure for many students, maybe that could be some kind of worksheet or an iReady or something like that. But we tell them, okay, we're done with this. And now we're going to transition to this other thing, which is hard, or this other thing that they don't like. Or maybe now they have to move to a different classroom with a different teacher that they don't like. And they're thinking to themselves, and maybe not even overtly thinking, right? I'm going to engage in some problem behavior. I'm going to tantrum. Maybe I can delay having to go to that class, or maybe I can avoid having to, go through with this transition altogether. So that's the second reason. And then the third reason is that the new activity often has less reinforcement available. In fact, I feel like I should touch on number two, one thing, like give you an example of what that might look like, just a little bit more. It's easy for us to kind of think about the activities that kids would want to avoid. Oh, they don't like doing this. They think this is a hard task or something like that. But like location wise, you might think, well, what would be a location they would want to avoid? Maybe this isn't applicable to kids, but it's certainly applicable to me. If I was a kid in school, I remember I've been to some preschools, many preschools actually. I went to one preschool where their outside activities, their like recess area had like a not astroturf and not asphalt, somewhere in between, like a spongy looking asphalt, but it's black. And then all the playground equipment were directly exposed to the sun. And so being out there, you know, midsummer in Florida, it was so freaking hot. It was unbelievably hot. I didn't want to be there. And I thought, man, I don't even know how these kids want to be there. So it could be like that, transitioning to a location where it smells weird or it's super hot or the desks are different or uncomfortable. Who knows? So back to 3. The new activity often has less reinforcement available, making it less preferred. So it might be a less fun activity in itself, but also some other ways that it might make it less preferred would be maybe when the teacher is doing the former activity or the pre-transition activity, teachers are going around and saying like, good job, or giving some kind of praise or encouragement. Maybe the kids are allowed to work together during this pre-transition activity. And then the new activity, maybe it's not more difficult, but no one's coming around with praise. They're not allowed to work together. It feels more boring. Maybe the new activity is with a teacher who does not give praise, or a teacher who's maybe extra punitive, something like that. So the moral of that story is whatever they're transitioning to feels less reinforcing for them, so they don't want to go. So how do we prepare for the transitions? Well, transitions are easier when a child can anticipate when, where, and why the transitioning is happening. And visual schedules and verbal reminders are huge here. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the visual schedule, but yeah, I'm going to talk more about in depth about the visual schedule. So every day you're going to want to review the daily schedule. And I think we think about this a lot of times with little kids, but this is important for bigger kids too. A reviewing of the daily schedule. What is it that's expected? What is planned? And at what time are we going to engage in these things? So let's see. Review the daily schedule every morning and give reminders throughout. And I gave examples of a 30-minute or a 5-minute increment reminder. So for example, remember kids, in 30 minutes, we're going to have to pack up and we're going to have to go to this other classroom location, or, all right, 5 more minutes with this activity and then we're done and moving on. And so I think several reminders would be good. So not just don't choose 30 or the 5, use both. In fact, maybe even add an additional reminder. So more reminders are better. Although it does say, and this is important because the research shows that preparation alone is not enough to stop the problem behavior. Preparation is great. It is highly recommended, but it has to be used in conjunction with some other techniques and tools. Okay, so I am going to tell you more about this visual schedule thing. We have to schedule smart and we have to schedule for success. And so here's how. How do we set up a successful schedule? Well, it's not hard, but this might make it appear easier than it is. To tell you the truth, it does take some work, because once you have it and once you have the answer to some of these questions that I'm going to posit to you, don't think that those are just static answers. This is something we have to kind of reinvestigate all the time. So the first thing we do is we need to take notes on which activities the kids seem to like the most and which they like the least, and rank them. But it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. So when we're looking at, like, we almost want to make like 2 categories, right? Like, so like work type tasks, this might be our math, our reading comprehension, and then like fun type tasks or fun activities, and put them in 2 columns and then rank them in those columns. Because not all tasks or not all work is created equally. There are some types of work kids would rather do, or that they do quicker, or that they are more likely to actually follow through and complete. And then in the other category, on the other column, if we were writing it on a piece of paper, would be like the fun stuff. And again, the fun stuff isn't created equally either. There's definitely activities that kids would prefer to do. Maybe they would prefer painting over story time. Maybe they would prefer recess over snacks. So we want to create these columns where we're ranking them and trying to figure out, like, okay, what is basically the hierarchy of activities and rewards, or we call them reinforcements. When we do this, it helps us so that we can create or we can implement a phenomenon known as behavioral momentum. And so behavioral momentum is kind of what it sounds like. And so momentum is we're going to get them started with a task so that we create some sort of momentum, some sort of forward energy, and then we can introduce more difficult tasks while they're in that momentum state or momentous state, while they have some of that momentum. So in order to create behavioral momentum, we have to do a couple things. We have to identify tasks that have a high success rate. So not from the play category, but more so from like the work activity category. What are some tasks in the work activity category that you know they will do, that they don't mind doing? We want to think about those. We want to start with those. So if our main goal is to get these kids to engage in an activity that we know they don't want to do, we never want to come out the gate with that one. That's not going to work. We want to come out of the gate with something somewhat easier, something that we know they're going to complete, maybe even two of activities like that, so that we can create real momentum. And then after we get them started with those two, we call them high P or high probability tasks, we know they're going to do them, right? Then we can introduce something that they're less likely to do because they already have this momentum. But this is just part of a schedule. I'm going to have to, on the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about how that looks and where that needs to be placed in the overall daily schedule. So for the daily schedule, it says to stagger the schedule with preferred tasks and non-preferred tasks, and to try to put really fun and reinforcing activities immediately after the hard activities. So this doesn't look necessarily one by one by one. It doesn't necessarily look non-preferred, preferred, non-preferred, preferred, non-preferred, preferred. Because if so, where would we get the behavioral momentum? But I think the most important thing I want you to gather from setting up the schedule is that whenever you have a really non-preferred task in that schedule, what should come immediately after it is something that is very, very preferred from the reinforcer column. So like the highest in the reinforcer column. The reason for this is what's going to motivate the kids to complete this really aversive task. I don't want to do it. I hate this. I hate math, whatever. But if right after math, I know that there's maybe my favorite, I'm thinking of a preschool class again, where their favorite thing in the world was that song, The Floor is Lava. And they would play this song, The Floor is Lava, and all the kids would run and scream when this certain part of the song came on where it said, The floor is lava. So that was their favorite thing in the world. If I was working with that class, that would be my go-to reinforcer that I would put in a visual schedule, right? Immediately after the most difficult tasks. But remember, prior to the most difficult task, I've built up behavioral momentum. So I had one or two somewhat easier tasks that I know they would complete, this hard task, and immediately following, I've got my floor is lava. The reason for this, and this is probably one of the most important things about the schedule, is everything in the schedule is on a contingency. You cannot move to the next item until you have successfully completed the item before it. That part is super important, because if that part doesn't hold like a law, then you lose, then none of this stuff really even applies and none of it matters, okay? So if it's a contingency, then that means once I do this hard task, and only once I do this hard task, do I get to move on to the floor is lava. If the kids know that, and it might take, a couple times before they realize this. Oh, okay, the only time, if we don't do this, she's really not going to let us move on to the floor is lava. But once they figure that out, that can also be motivation to just hurry up and let's just get through this hard task, because all of us want to play the floor is lava or whatever it may be. So it's very, very important that we pay attention to how we're scheduling these tasks, that we try to stagger anything that is aversive or non-preferred. Right after it comes something preferred. We use our hierarchy that we built before to try to figure out how to match those, right? So if it's a non-preferred, but it's not really super non-preferred, so it's not super high up on the hierarchy list, then we don't have to follow it with the highest reinforcer. We can follow it with a medium level reinforcer. So it's we're a little bit of math brain that we're using when we're devising this schedule, because we have to create the schedule a certain way with contingencies, with the staggering in order to ensure success. So more about this schedule. Okay, so ideally you want to start the day with something engaging and relatively easy. I've seen in like some kindergarten classrooms, they might start with like talking about the days of the week or what is today. The kids are engaged, they're sitting around, but we're also learning a little bit too. So it's not only fun, it's learning. Then we move into something that requires some effort, but has a high probability of being completed. So then, okay, we do something that's a little bit more effortful. We take a little break. It cannot be a long break because we have to capitalize on the momentum. Maybe even not even a break, but like if I don't know if you guys can use edibles in your classroom. If you can, a little edible would be great, like here's a little cookie or a little candy. If not, maybe stickers. Stickers are really easy. All right, here's some stickers, go around, high fives. And then we move into the more difficult task. We make sure that difficult task is followed by something that is very reinforcing, that absolutely cannot be accessed without the completion of the difficult task. So the example I was using a minute ago about the floor is lava. If the floor is lava is on that visual schedule and they don't complete the task before it, we don't get the floor is lava again until that task gets completed. And that is a contingency that needs to carry over, not just for the whole day, but like forever. So like the next day, if they want the floor is lava, we go back to, okay, but remember, in order to get this floor is lava, we have to finish this task that we didn't finish. So that contingency holds no matter what. If it has to carry on for weeks, then it carries on for weeks. That's super important. If it doesn't carry on, you're really not going to motivate them to get through the difficult task. And then this is a little note that I put in here as well, because I think this is important. It is important to consider what is always accessible to them, not just in school, but at home. If it is something that they can access all the time, or as soon as they get home, it won't motivate completion of the aversive. So this is really important too, when you're trying to think about these reinforcing activities. Don't think about only what you do in the classroom. What do these kids do when they get home? A lot of kids nowadays will play on their iPads or some sort of technology device. So we have to assume that if there's a contingency we're placing with access to some sort of technology device, a cartoon or something maybe we want to show them, we have to assume that they can probably get that when they go home. So this is a little bit tricky, but you want to try to think of activities or games that you can do in the classroom that they're less likely to encounter in the home environment. That makes those activities all the more rewarding and reinforcing, and it creates more motivation for me to get through the aversive task. If this reinforcing activity that follows it is something I can only have when I'm in my classroom. So it's a lot of thought, but I think just start taking some notes. And as I said before, this is something that's going to change over time. Like what is the most difficult task today might not be the most difficult task 3 weeks from now. So once you get this schedule set up, keep checking in on, okay, with our little list of 2 columns, has anything moved? Is this more reinforcing now than it used to be? Is this less difficult than it used to be? And then you might have to modify your schedule I say might, but in reality, yes, you should. You should modify your schedule all the time with the new information that you have. Okay. We are at the Q&A. We got through this one pretty quick. Tomorrow, we're going to go into more detail about transitions, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of information about like classroom activities and sensory experiences that can maybe fall into the good or bad / aversive reinforcement categories. So we got a lot more to cover tomorrow. But I wanted to leave at least a little bit of time to answer any questions you might have based on what we've covered today. So if you have any questions for me, I have the chat box open now. I figured out how to do that. So you can go ahead and put your questions in here and I'm happy to answer them.